Do you have a cousin or nephew that you only see from time to time? One minute they're in nappies, the next minute they've got a moustache, a job and a hatchback. And you think, how did that happen? Well, that's kind of the story with this car. One minute, Kia was building budget-conscious family cars for the masses with fairly conventional engineering. And the next minute, there's this, an all-electric supercar with a price tag near enough to 6 figures. Well, how did that happen? And does it live up to the hype? Here's the big talking point, that purchase price for the EV6 GT. Yes, $100,000 is a lot to pay for a family SUV with a Kia badge, but the GT is much more than that. You'll know what I'm talking about when we take it for a spin in a moment. In fact, you can hit the CarsGuide website and find the full written review of this car with full specifications. Meantime, you have to remember that a lot of the running costs of an EV are up front, and that the tech involved isn't cheap or easy to come by either. On the plus side, there's plenty of kit here, including LED matrix headlights, 21-inch wheels and tyres, sporty front seats, which are also heated, full connectivity, a sunroof, dual 12.3-inch screens inside, acoustic solar glass and digital radio. The big omissions seem to be the lack of powered front seats, but that's because manual seats are lighter and can be mounted lower for helmet-wearing drivers doing track days. The lack of a power-adjustable steering column is a little harder to explain. Something that Kia should get extra design marks for is the fact that we aren't just getting the cookie-cutter one-size-fits-all EV6 GT. Instead, Kia has continued with the theme of using local suspension experts to tailor the ride and handling to suit Aussie conditions. Beyond that, the need for bigger brakes, thanks to the GT's extra pace, has been a switch to 21-inch non-EV tyres for grip, and a redesigned lower ball joint in the front end so that everything fits. A long wheelbase means a lot of legroom in the GT, although it's a more comfortable 4-seater than a 5, thanks to the heavy sculpting of the rear bench. Headroom will be an issue for taller folk who will find that the sunroof eats into that territory. There are plenty of USB and charge points, wireless phone charging and a bottle holder in each door, and the rear seat folds flat to give the GT similar practicality to any other hatchback its size. Gripes? Well, they'd include the starter button that is in an odd place, reflective silver buttons on the steering wheel, and a gear selector that is dimly lit and hard to see in some light conditions. The EV6 GT is a pure electric car. It has a motor on the front axle and another motor on the rear axle. Bingo, all-wheel drive, which you need to harness all those Newton meters. How many Newton meters? 740 and 430 kilowatts, which is pretty outrageous. It's also got drive modes, including a drift mode. There's extra body bracing. There's huge brakes, which are forced 21-inch wheels with very sporty Michelin tyres, and even an electronically locking rear diff to make the most of that grip and to make this car track-worthy, which is what Kia claims for it. The transmission is a single speed, which is actually typical for electric vehicles. Basically, it doesn't need a gearbox, it's got so much torque. You want to go faster, you spin the electric motor faster. And oh boy, does this car understand faster. Under the floor of the GT is a 77.4 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack, which Kia says is good for up to 424 kilometres of range. And if you can't see the charge port anywhere, it's because it's hidden. How cool is that? The onboard charger can handle 10.5 kilowatts and takes about 7.5 hours to go from 10% to 100% charge. Using a 50 kilowatt fast charger, you're looking at 73 minutes to go from 10 to 80% charge. And if you can find a 350 kilowatt fast charger and actually extract 350 kilowatts from it, that time drops to just 18 minutes. Okay, so styling's subjective, always is, but I reckon this car looks pretty good. There's more sporty car about it than SUV, and I think that's a step in the right direction. It's also got a very long wheelbase, which again gives it a slightly lower look than it might have had. And that means great legroom in the back. It really is quite good. It'll seat 4 people, 4 adults really comfortably. As far as the actual driving goes, well, it's a lot firmer than I thought it was going to be in terms of its suspension.
I kind of thought they'd soften it off a little bit to make it a nice, comfy road car. But the reality is, it's really quite firm in any of its three settings. You've got normal, sport, comfort, and then there's another setting. I'll get to that in a minute. But the dampers are quite firm, but because they're electronically controlled, and because the people that set them up have set them up for Australian conditions, and these guys really know what they're talking about. These are world-class engineers. This car, even though it is quite firm, it actually really rides quite well. It doesn't lift wheels, it doesn't want to skip and bounce about, and that's even in its firmest setting. It's actually really sporty, but yet retains a certain civility that you really don't expect when you first jump in and feel how taut it is. The other thing I'm surprised about is how fast the steering is. It's actually got a quicker steering rack than other EV6s in the range, and that means it turns in fast and it turns in very accurately. And of all the cars I've driven over the years with electrically powered power steering, this is among the top handful. It's that good. Now, I know what you really want to know is how fast this thing is. Well, the short answer is very. In one mode, it's got 200 and something kilowatts. In sport mode, it's got 300 and something kilowatts. But if you press this green button, this GT button on the steering wheel, that liberates the full 430 kilowatts. And it is stunning. There's no other word for it. It's like you're accelerating in a cartoon. It's that vivid. If you've never driven an electric car, you should go out and try one, because all of them get off the mark pretty smartly. But this thing is on another level. It's from another planet. Forget variable geometry turbochargers, forget sequential manual gearboxes. EV, electric power, is absolutely where it's at these days. Trust me. So is there anything I don't like about it? Well, it doesn't have some of the things I thought it might. It doesn't have electrically controlled steering column. It doesn't have electrically controlled front seats, which in other cars at this price point you would expect. However, the payoff here is it keeps weight out of the car. Now, one of the claims Kia makes for this car, and it's a little bit hard to believe at first until you drive it, is that the car is what they call track ready or track worthy, or you could use it on track days at a racetrack. Well, that sounds kind of like it's a little bit at odds with a family car, but in this case they have actually gone to a bit of trouble. This car has got huge brakes, although with the regenerative braking from the electric motors, you don't really use the brakes as much as you would in some cars. And also, the seats I was talking about that are non-power assisted, apparently that manual mechanism allows you to get the seat lower in the car, which is better for when you're wearing a helmet. Same with the headrests. They're angled back at an angle that allows you to drive with a helmet on. Although, if you're going to build a car to drive with a helmet on, you delete the sunroof, and this car comes with a sunroof. So, bit from column A, bit from column B.
While the rest of the Kia EV6 range has been ANCAP tested and scored the full 5 stars, the sports bucket front seats in the GT version mean it can't piggyback onto those results, so at this stage it hasn't been tested. Beyond that, you do get just about every modern driver aid imaginable and passive safety that includes 7 airbags, including a centre side airbag to prevent head clashes in the case of a side impact. Like other Kias, the EV6 GT gets a 7-year unlimited warranty on the basic hardware. The high voltage components, meantime, get 7 years and 150,000 kilometres of cover. Servicing is every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, and there's a choice of a 3, 5 or 7 year servicing plan you can purchase up front. Beyond that, running costs will come down to how and where you recharge the car and keeping it in those expensive Michelin tyres.
I reckon one of the biggest problems this car's going to have, if not its biggest problem, is that people are going to go to barbecues and sit down and attempt to convince themselves that 100 grand is too much to pay for a Kia. Well, let me tell you, you can spend a lot more than 100,000 and not go as fast or have the dynamics that this car has got. And don't forget, as with any EV, to a certain extent, you're front loading your ongoing running costs in the purchase price of the car. Now, maybe this was an opportunity for Kia to launch a prestige performance brand, similar to what Hyundai did with Genesis all those years ago. That hasn't happened. But what has happened is this car proves that electric vehicles are now not just about going fast in a straight line, they're also about going very fast around corners. Welcome to Performance Cars 2.0.